Stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Thursday night, and this is Farage at Live. Live from Burton-upon-Trent. Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage.
Yes, we're in Burton-upon-Trent, the home of Brewing, the home of Burton Albion Football Club, a Conservative seat with a big majority, but they did badly in the local elections. Lots to talk about locally. Sad story from France internationally. All of that coming up with a live audience after the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nigel. Our top story tonight. 4 children, including a British national and 2 adults, have been injured in a knife attack in the French Alps. Now, it's understood that the knifeman is a Syrian national who has refugee status in Sweden. He entered France legally and wasn't previously known to security agencies. Shocking footage has emerged online of the 31-year-old carrying out that attack in a playground in the Alpine town of Annecy. Police say he was shot in the legs whilst being arrested and has since been taken to hospital. French former football player Anthony Le Tallec was at the scene and described what he saw.
I saw the guy who, indeed, is coming in front of me. He's on the grass. The cops are right behind, about 5 or 10 metres behind him, and who can't catch up with him. So I move out of the way a little, and I see him going straight towards men and women, and he attacks. He attacks the old guy. He stabs him once. The cops are behind him, can't catch up with him. And I tell the cops, just shoot him, kill him. He's stabbing everybody. So he attacks once, twice, and then they start shooting. So they shoot in front of me.
So here's what we know about the 5 victims. 4 are children. They're all aged between 22 months and 3 years old. 2 of the toddlers and the adult are in a life-threatening condition. Witnesses saying that at least 1 of the children was in a pram at the time of the attack. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the French President have condemned the attacker as cowardly. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly saying that the family of the injured British toddler will be offered support.
We stand ready to support the French authorities in whichever way we can. Also aware that one of the children injured was a British national. We have already deployed British consular officials who are travelling to the area to make themselves available to support the family.
President Biden has told Rishi Sunak that the special relationship between the UK and the US is in real good shape. That's during talks at the White House earlier. Meeting in the Oval Office, Rishi Sunak mentioned the strength of that partnership and he promised to continue to put our values front and centre. The 2 leaders also discussed how they've stood together in support of Ukraine and the potential dangers of new technologies such as AI.
We face a war on the European continent, and as we've done before, the US and the UK have stood together to support Ukraine and stand up for the values of democracy and freedom and make sure that they prevail, as I know we will.
Senior medics have warned the NHS is struggling to provide safe and effective care for all cancer patients. The Royal College of Radiologists warns that government action is now critical to alleviate chronic staff shortages, with 15% of clinical oncologist positions still vacant. They say this is leading to longer waiting times for appointments and treatment, with half of all units reporting frequent delays for both radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Ukraine's military claims that flooding in the Kherson region after the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam is forcing Russian troops to retreat by up to 15 kilometres. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been visiting the area where hundreds of thousands of people have been left stranded and without drinking water. There's concern that the water level at a reservoir near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is running dangerously low. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn 2. This is GB News. Back now to Nigel Farage.
Good evening. Yes, it's Farage at large and in Burton-upon-Trent in Staffordshire in the East Midlands. Now, we begin the show with a bit of a disappointment. You see, as we travel around the country, we always invite the local MP to attend, and very often they say, yeah, I'll be happy to come along. Other times they say, no, can't do it, previous engagement. But we nearly always get somebody senior from the council to come along. It very rarely doesn't happen. But here we are. Here we are in Burton-upon-Trent. The local Member of Parliament was elected as Kate Griffiths with a very big 14,000 majority. She's reverted to her maiden name now. She's known as Kate Niverton. We sent phone calls, we sent emails to her office, and we didn't get any answer whatsoever. Yesterday we got an email saying she couldn't attend. We then spoke to one or two Tory councillors, and I'll tell you why in a moment, because local politics here has changed a bit in the last month or two. And other Tory councillors said, no, they can't attend, as they feared it might make Kate look bad. I don't know what you're scared of, Kate. It can't be me, obviously. Maybe you're scared of facing your constituents. Maybe you're just lying low because, of course, this council had a huge turnaround and is now a Labour majority. Labour stormed it in this area. Either way, I think it's all a pretty poor show. But moving on from that, a piece of polling out today suggesting that Keir Starmer is heading for a majority of 140. That would be even bigger than the majority Blair got in that landslide back in 1997. And one of the reasons, well, it's all too clear. A report out today by Migration Watch. This organisation has been around for 20 years. It's made a series of predictions. It's never been wrong. They are saying today that if net migration continues on its current course, by 2046, the population of the UK will be 80 million people. And right now, we are not building enough homes, enough houses, enough dwellings for those that are coming into the country, let alone for those already living in the country. Housing is becoming one of the biggest crises of our times, and a population that's up by the best part of 10 million since Blair came to power, I think explains the reason. At some point, the electorate will make that connection between net migration, between housing, between lack of school places. It is a huge population crisis that is upon us, and it gives the Conservatives huge problems, which is why I'm disappointed the MP didn't come. Now, we had intended tonight to talk purely about issues that affect this town, and in many cases they're the same issues that affect the rest of the country. But the events in Annecy this morning in France are so shocking, are so huge in their implications, that we have to talk about it. The stabbings of 4 youngsters aged between 22 months and 3 years, and 2 very seriously injured adults. It all seems hard to believe. I must admit, I was sent the video. I couldn't bring myself to press the on button. I simply didn't want to watch a kid in a pram being stabbed. The assailant, who's been shot and wounded, but is in police custody, and the wounding that he's got is not fatal in any way at all, was a Syrian refugee who went some years ago to Sweden, got his asylum status, and then, of course, because of Schengen and no borders in Europe, once you're in one country, you're free to move anywhere. And, of course, it was in France where this occurred. He was somebody who was known to the authorities not for doing anything wrong, but they had his identity, they knew who it was. So think about this. We're letting in tens of thousands of young men every year who haven't got passports, haven't got phones, have no identity whatsoever. We've no real idea who they are, what their criminal records are. And you know something, if it can happen in France, well, it can certainly happen here too. There is no room for complacency. There is no room. We frankly can't wait. Rishi Sunak promised he'd stop the boats. I'm told the earliest this could happen would effectively be in September, by which many thousands more would have come. This is an issue of national security for France, but it is for us too. Well, joining me down the line with this slight change to our programme today is Professor Anthony Glees, security and intelligence expert at the University of Buckingham. Anthony, good evening. This horrific incident in France is, of course, one of many over the course of the last 10 years.
Well, absolutely so. Nigel, I think it is important to begin by saying we still don't know the full facts of this case. I mean, there are stories that this Syrian asylum seeker granted refugee status and married, now separated, to a Swedish woman, was in fact a Christian and not a Muslim. We simply don't know how this is going to play out. What's very disturbing about this appalling attack, which appears to be, thought about very carefully, is, of course, that it was a knife attack. And people like me who follow these things carefully know that lone wolf knife attacks are very much a feature of Islamist terror right now. We know it, of course, in the United Kingdom because we've had at least 10 Islamist knife attacks here. It's often difficult to get hold of guns, and if you have, it's difficult to get hold of ammunition. So when so-called Islamic State agitators called on radicalized Muslims to use kitchen knives, that call has been answered, and it has been answered in the United Kingdom. The question is, was it answered in Annecy? And we simply don't know. There are many glorious features here. We have to be careful. But your wider point is, if you're saying people are entitled to have security from known risks and known threats, that our security officials should be protecting us from this kind of attack, even if this chap was just a nutter and a madman. It's got nothing to do with politics or religion. We don't know, but we do know that we have had these attacks. Then I would say, you're right. But as you know, we've debated this in the past. Since Brexit, the number of people coming from Africa, from Asia into the United Kingdom has reached exponential proportions, sending a few people back on boats who come on boats to Rwanda and so on. That's not going to solve the problem. So this is a very serious...
Well, no, I don't think, Anthony, I don't believe Rishi Sunak does have the formula for solving this problem. I don't think he's got the guts to stand up to the international condemnation that he would get if he did what Tony Abbott did in Australia 10 years ago, where he towed the boats back to Indonesia. But I think, the broader point on this, Anthony, is, the argument I'm making is large numbers of undocumented young males are coming into our country. I understand that we do fingerprint them, and we do try and check that with international records, but the point I'm making is we are wide open to this and worse.
Well, we are. Now, again, you and I have debated this in the past, Nigel. In my view, the best way of doing this is transnationally. It is working together with the European authorities and taking the lead, as we took the lead in over the European Union nations in supplying aid to Ukraine. So we should take the lead in telling people that they've got to be much more careful about vetting, about whom they admit to Europe, and above all, encouraging people to stay, to make it possible for them to stay in their own countries. After all, nobody in their right mind wants to risk their lives crossing the channel on a small boat. So in my view, we have to do more things together.
I think
but where
we've lost the professor, but I think we got the gist of what he was saying, and that's always the risk of doing things down the line. Well, Anthony makes the point there that we don't know for certain who this person is, but we do know that through people claiming asylum and being allowed to stay, there have been far too many attacks, and the risk is this goes up. Anthony mentioned Brexit. Well, here's one of the ironies of all of this. One of the reasons I campaigned so vigorously for Brexit, one of the reasons I used that poster, Breaking Point, which showed large numbers of young men coming into the European Union uninvited, is I could see what was going to happen. Only by getting back control of our borders could we protect ourselves from this sort of thing. And I have to say, this government has singularly failed to do that at all. And it isn't just the 45,000, of course, that crossed on boats. It's those getting out on the side of the M1 at motorway service stations that are coming in the backs of lorries. And you go back 20 years to when Labour were in power, and they were actually deporting thousands of people every single year that came here illegally. We now deport virtually nobody. And I think this issue of national security, I think it's underestimated by many in our media, by most in our parliament, but I get a feeling that the people of Burton and around this country are not only appalled by what they've seen today in France, but deeply concerned about what's happening here. Now, we are here in Burton. It is the home of Brewing. What a more appropriate place could there possibly be for Nigel Farage to come to do a Farage at large? I mean, after all, no photograph of me in a national newspaper has ever been published without me holding a pint. So in a moment, I went for a visit today round a brewery. Don't say GB News can't organise things in breweries. Back with you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As we came to Burton, it seemed only right, given that this really is the home of brewing. It made sense to go and visit a pub, and so we did. We went to the Burton Bridge Brewery, where Jeff Mumford, the boss, showed me around. Take a look at this.
Well, I don't know if you know about what happens malting-wise. It comes off the fields. It's a mere specific, for want of a better expression, breed of barley.
Yep.
That's for the brewing and the malting industry. And its important aspects are low in nitrogen. The other aspect is a fairly even grain size.
Yep.
Give it a taste. Yeah. It'll remind you of something.
Oh, yeah. Good, isn't it?
Yeah. We've milled the malt.
Yep.
We've transferred it up into this grist case, which then transfers it to what's called a mash tun, where it's mixed with water at 70 degrees centigrade, and it's got a false bottom full of holes, a strainer plate, and we leave it in there for an hour and a half. Temperature's important, 70 degrees C, so after an hour and a half we raise the temperature and spray much hotter water on the top of the mash and drain the sugars off the bottom. And we pump that up into this vessel, referred to as a copper. It gets up to boiling in about 25 minutes.
Okay.
And we boil it for an hour.
Really?
And we add hops. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when we pump it into these utility vessels, fairly utility vessels, and we add the last ingredient, which is yeast. It's fermenting probably about 5 days, depending on how strong the beer is.
Wow.
Stronger beers take longer.
Right.
Because there are more sugars to be consumed.
Yeah.
And the yeast multiplies considerably. And at the end of that, we cool it down to 8 degrees centigrade and pump this cloudy beer through to what we call the racking tank and rack it into casks. It goes into store, and we like to keep it for a week.
Well, Jeff, thanks for the tour, and cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, it's very good. I think there's some chance we won't be broadcasting at 7 o'clock tonight. I might just stay here. Well, I'm joined by Jeff Mumford, co-director of the Burton Bridge Brewery. Jeff, thanks for the tour around there earlier. It did taste delicious, but we made it.
Yeah, I've decided not to pursue a career in television.
Oh, I don't know. What was it about this town that made it, for centuries, the home of brewing?
Well, effectively, it was the water. Burton sits on a bowl of gypsum, and it's the water percolating through the gypsum, picking up hardness, and that hardness in the water gave, when boiled, when the hops were boiled, gave much finer taste than the softer waters in the London area, and that was basically the start of it. At the turn of the last century, there were 9 breweries in Burton, and they were from far flung as well. In Coop, which is down Station Street, originally its brewery was Romford in Essex, but there was such a call for Burton beers, they built a brewery in Burton, and so did Robinson's of Stockport. And
so this really was the Mecca?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, until some clever person worked out how you could put those essential salts into tap water, and they all slowly moved away and brewed their pale, what were known as pale ales, in their own particular breweries. Yeah.
Now, you went out on your own with your partner 40 years ago to be an independent brewer.
Yeah.
You've had a good run of it. You've been up to 6 pubs that you've owned in the area. You've had a very good run at it, but goodness me, things for the pub trade right at the moment, very tough.
Oh, they are, yes. It's probably the toughest period we've experienced. And people have just stopped going out, or some of the people have stopped going out. And pub trade most pubs are trading at about half the capacity they did before.
And the pandemic simply changed people's habits.
It did, yeah. Well, I think there was an element of also when your wife's been getting packs of beer from the supermarket during the lockdowns, and you want to step out and go to the pub, you suddenly say, what was wrong with the stuff you've been drinking for the last 3 months?
Yeah, and of course, price, that's a huge problem, isn't it? Because you can buy bulk beer at certain big supermarket chains very, very cheaply.
Yeah.
It is sad what's happening to our pubs. But with it, the brewing industry is adapting. I mean, you're selling, casks that people can have delivered to their houses. Is the brewing industry okay?
Not really.
No.
The brewing industry in the last 40 years has become more of a cottage industry.
What, little microbreweries?
Yes.
Yeah.
When we started, we were the only small brewery in Staffordshire. There are now over 30. And the strange thing is, pubs are closing and people are opening breweries as fast as pubs are closing.
It's funny, isn't it?
And it doesn't make sense. But a lot of it is that, 40, 50 years ago, men used to dream of having their own pub. Now they dream of having their own brewery.
Now, you've had a long career in the brewing industry. You said to me earlier what fun it had been to be in brewing. And for those that don't realise this, in the old days, there used to be wet breweries. You were allowed to drink on the job, weren't you?
Oh, yes. Well, we had wet canteens, which were bars. Yeah. Wet canteens and dry canteens. And you were given tokens to hand in to get your beer in the wet canteen, and they became like illegal currency. I mean, some of them would climb the brewery chimney up the inside for a bluey.
Amazing stuff. Jeff Mumford, thanks for the tour today. Thanks for talking to us about brewing in Burton. Now, thank you. Those that watch this programme regularly will know something called the TRIC Awards is coming up. It's the television and radio's annual big bash at a smart hotel in London, and it's normally a very big self-congratulatory slap on the back for all the liberal broadcasters based in London. And as you know, my name, amongst others at GB News, had been put forward. I'd asked people to vote for me to go onto the shortlist. Well, the shortlist was announced last night. There are 5 names going forward. One is Eamon Holmes of GB News. One is Stephen Dixon of GB News. One is Nigel Farage of GB News. And one is Susanna Reid. And the 5th one is Piers Morgan. So, this is all going to be fun. Now, I know from talking to some of you earlier, this lot support me, but to show that we're a balanced broadcaster, Joe Casper of our team went out onto the streets of Islington today to ask them what they thought about Nigel Farage's nomination. Here goes.
I don't really give
I know very little about Nigel Farage.
Yeah, I like Nigel Farage.
Do you?
Yes, he's very stand-up for the British people.
I don't think he's a very intelligent person. No, I think he should not win. Because he doesn't use facts, he uses suppositions.
I'm not sure, but I think it's quite interesting that he's even being nominated.
Don't have an opinion, I'm afraid.
I don't even know him. Well, I don't think he's been in it long enough, really, presenting, so I would think they're much more worthy people. Well, Susanna Reid would be mine.
I preferred Alistair Stewart. I thought he was a better presenter.
He's been nominated for a Best Presenter award.
He has?
Yeah.
Disgusted. Well, I don't like GB News anyway.
Well, there we are. Just goes to show that you get balanced views here on GB News. In a moment, it's Barrage the Farage, where the audience fire their questions at me, and I have no idea as yet what they are. Woo! Thank you. Thank you.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Channel.
Okay, so some news coming out of the White House. President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak have announced in the last few minutes an Atlantic declaration where they will attempt to remove trade barriers, be closer together on defence and share data. Well, we do all of those things already, but there's no trade deal. And when Sunak was asked about it, he he came out with blather, basically. And as for the leader of the free world, he addressed Rishi Sunak as president. And he forgot the name of Winston Churchill. There we are. Let's crack on with Barrage the Farage. Brandon is up first.
Thank you, Nigel. Good evening. My question, you'll like this question, is if you had one last chance as a member of the European Parliament to address the European Parliament, what would you tell those unelected bureaucrats and why?
Well, of course, I did famously, after Brexit, say, when I first came here, you all laughed at me, but you're not laughing now, which was a particularly joyous moment. I would tell them, if I was there today, I'd say, look what's happening. Look what's happening. You've got Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister now of Italy. You've got Marine Le Pen now odds on to win the next election. There is actually a sort of populist revolt against this centralised control from Brussels going on, and I think at the moment they're asleep to it. I've always believed the project wouldn't survive in the end. I think if the European countries are independent, free, and they've got their own different languages and different cheeses and all of those things, then I would say vive la différence. I think the model of Europe is wrong and it's changing. What say you?
I completely agree.
Well, there you are.
You get most young people, I'm only 19, but you get most young people, they support the European Union, but they're not really sure why.
Yeah.
But having studied A-level history and modern Britain and its entrance and exit out of the European Union or the EEC or whatever it is, you know, why would you give away such sovereignty? We have such great powers in this country. Why give it to people that cannot be held accountable by anybody?
In the history of mankind, no free people ever willingly give up the right to govern themselves. Brandon, you're a star. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nigel.
Dawn. Hello, Dawn.
Hello, Nigel. Can I just ask you, do you think Prince Harry is ever going to come back to Britain with any kind of respect after what...
The last couple of days have been a complete disaster. No facts at all. I think this might have happened. I think he answered yesterday, I don't remember, 18 times. I mean, the whole thing's been a total embarrassment. Look, you know, I probably shouldn't say this really, but she's not going to stay married to him for long. She's got what she wants. She's got what she wants out of it. She's got fame, she's got money, she wants to pursue a political career. I think he will return at some point, like the prodigal son, and despite all the beastly things he said about his family, the damage he did to the last 2 years of his late grandmother's life, the denigration he's put our own country through, do you know what, Dawn? We'll forgive him. I think we'll forgive him.
We are British people, we do forgive.
Yeah. That word is in there. I'm hearing never around the audience. But actually, I've gone from being angry with him, I now feel a bit sorry for him.
Yes.
He's a completely lost soul. Yes, he's done damage, but I just think we're a very forgiving people. Dawn, thank you very much indeed. OK. Matthew.
Evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
What do you think about the future of field sports in the UK, and what are you doing to preserve and protect it?
Well, I've always been absolutely, unashamed in my support for the countryside. I'm an angler, I shoot a bit, I've never hunted, but I've supported local hunts, and I think there is a huge amount, frankly, of metropolitan urban ignorance around some of these issues. I mean, I had an email exchange with a woman this week. Oh, Nigel, I agree with you on so much, but not on this. I said, well, OK, but let's have the right to agree to disagree and be civil. She was going on about foxes. I said, but if you don't control foxes, there'll be no skylarks. There'll be no hares, because they'll kill all the ground-nesting creatures. So we have a duty as man, I think, given how much we've done to the landscape already, to protect it. I fear, Matthew, that there is an urban majority, and that those that pursue what are called field sports are an unfavoured minority. Some minorities get all sorts of rights. I worry about driven shooting. I worry generally about our understanding of the countryside. I think it's going to get tougher for those that want to shoot and fish. I genuinely do. What do you think?
I would tend to agree with you, Nigel.
Yeah.
It is getting very tough out there to own guns legally.
Well, even get a shotgun licence now is very... If you're a criminal, it's no problem at all. You go and buy a sawed-off one in Nottingham tonight without much... Well, no, it's true. I mean, they really are making life very, very difficult. And, of course, Boris's wife, Carrie, and the goldsmiths and all these people, putting all these things into place without really having any understanding of actually how the countryside works. They think that those of us that fish and shoot are barbarians. Actually, we are genuine nature lovers. I've always been a conservationist. I hate some of the things that are going on in the world today. But people that shoot and fish, actually, they're the ones that look after the rivers, want to look after the seas, want to keep woods, hedgerows, and all the rest of it. And I will, Matthew, keep fighting for it in the face of whatever criticism it takes. I go to the local West Kent meet every Boxing Day. Main reason is the bar's open at 10, which is quite good. And every year the Daily Mirror are there, the photographers there say, right, let's do it. And I'm in the Mirror every 27th of December, sort of outrage as Farage visits Hunt. But you know what? I believe in a free society. It's not for the state to ban us. It's for us to make decisions as to what we do, whether we agree or disagree with each other on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, Drew.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening.
I'd like to know your views on our current PM, whether you think he's doing a good job and if there's anything you would do differently.
You're speaking to the mic.
Sorry. I just wondered what your views were on our current PM.
Oh, yeah.
Whether he's doing a good job and whether you'd do anything different if you were in number 10.
Well, as I say, you know, when he was asked about the free trade deal today, he just came out with blather. I mean, this is the biggest spinner since Blair. Everything's about spin, everything's about presentation. He went to Dover this week to say that the number of boats coming is down 20%, right? He did that because it was windy. They knew there'd be no boats in the Dover Harbour that day. I tell you what, he wouldn't go next Monday because the forecast is flat calm and they'll be coming again. And that says everything about Sunak. It's all about this spin and presentation. And frankly, let's be honest, whatever he says, you know, under his time, as an MP, as a cabinet minister, as a chancellor, as a prime minister, we have done nothing in this country to help the lot of ordinary folk. In fact, it's got tougher for them in every way. And I genuinely think that what you saw here with the council election results in Burton just a few weeks back, with a Labour landslide to a Labour majority, unless something big happens or unless Labour get too arrogant and make mistakes, I think these figures that suggest a Labour landslide are right. And the argument is, oh, well, Labour will be worse, Nigel. Well, you know what? 13 years of this lot, they've been pretty rotten. This guy doesn't connect with ordinary people and won't turn it round.
I agree.
All right. Cheers to both. Thank you. And finally, Rona.
Hiya.
Hello. Up nice and close to the mic, please.
At the moment, Boris has lost in politics, really. So my question is, are you and Boris teaming up for a great comeback to the Reform Party?
Well, you know, Boris is a very interesting character and can be very entertaining. I'm delighted he joined the Brexit campaign when he did. You know, in historical terms, it might have been 5 minutes to midnight, but he did, and that was a good thing. As Prime Minister, I've watched him preside over open-door immigration without any concern whatsoever. I have seen him put up tax rates, seemingly unconcerned, and I saw him locking us down 3 times officially, despite saying he didn't really want to do so, when we now know that the cost of lockdown, the health costs of lockdown, are going to far outweigh what was done. And so I think that Boris's time is done. There are those that still support him passionately, but I think most people who supported Boris in 2019 have lost faith. What do you think?
I think he was one of the first people to open the country up. Our country was one of the first countries to open up, really. I think he had a lot of people behind him that were in it for their own purposes and for money. And as he was the Prime Minister of the country at the time, I don't think he had an option.
Well, he was forced in the end by a backbench rebellion to start opening us up. We can argue the merits and demerits. I just think reputationally, I don't see him coming back to the front of politics. I just don't believe it'll happen. But hey, you know what, Rona? We all have different points of view. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.
Nigel, thank you.
In a moment, we will do Talking Pints in a moment. I'm going to be joined by local lad done good, Ben Robinson, MBE, the chairman of Burton Albion Football Club, joins me on, in Burton of all places, Talking Pints.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Well, it is now time for Talking Pints. And I'm joined by Ben Robinson. Ben from Burton, born here, raised here. And your achievements, the recognition you've received. You've had a British Empire Medal, an MBE, Member of the British Empire, a Deputy Lieutenant of Staffordshire, and, up until a few months ago, the High Sheriff of Staffordshire. Ben, you are Staffordshire aristocracy.
I thought aristocracy, I thought that was to do with breeding.
Well, you've got the rank, titles and positions, but yes, you didn't start off as a member of the aristocracy, did you?
No, so I was born in Burton-on-Trent. I'm sure lots of people here know that. And if I've achieved anything in my life, it's down to my mum, Edna, who started work at 14, working in the brewery, and there was water swilling everywhere, so she was given clogs to wear. But my mum instilled in me some great principles, like being honest, working hard, not just when you felt like it, but every day, so I owe a lot to my mum.
Yeah, the thought of wearing clogs today seems almost extraordinary, doesn't it? But
and starting work at 14 years of age, So,
yeah. And your father?
So my father was a black American GI. I inherited his first name, Clarence Pettiford. He came from Mabane in North Carolina. But my mum joined the war, and then he went back to the States. My mum corresponded with his family, so they learned all about the family. And many years later, a black cousin came over, stayed with us. We learned even more about the family then. And then my mum married my stepfather when I was 7, and he brought me up. So.
I mean, there were thousands of kids, weren't there, in your position?
2,000, yeah.
Yeah, the GIs were over here, overpaid, oversexed, and over here, or whatever they said. But it must have been, Ben, I mean, it wouldn't have been unusual to have a single-parent family, because a lot of boys of your age fathers would have been killed in the war.
Yeah. But what about the prejudice at that time?
How was it? I mean, how many people of colour, of any kind, were there in Burton in those days?
So, very few, actually, very few. I remember we moved to the village of Rolston-on-Dove when I was probably 7 or 8, and there was no people of colour. Obviously, that was just before the migration from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So colour then was there weren't many coloured people around. So yeah, so I've learned. Obviously, I started off as half caste and I became mixed race, and then dual heritage. I'm not quite sure what I am today.
No, yeah, the definitions.
You can decide.
The definitions keep changing, and if you use one of the old terms, suddenly you're the most awful person that's ever been born. Yeah. Did you encounter much difficulty?
A little bit, yeah. I think the thing is, look, the kids of today, they don't see colour, they see individuals, and they look at individuals, it's what you stand for as an individual, Obviously, when I was growing up, there was lots of prejudice, and you think back to 1966, and in 1966, I went to the States for the first time. Also, and that's where I met Pele, when he played for Santos against Benfica in New York, around the Zion Stadium, and then later at the Yankee Stadium. And I met Pele about 5 years ago when he came to Derby, and he remembered playing in that stadium, that baseball stadium.
Well, your love of football, I mean, you've been successful. You've gone from butcher's boy to insurance tycoon. And Burton Albion, you've been on and off chairman for, it's getting on for 50 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's getting on for 50 years. And you've had some amazing times with the club.
Yeah.
I mean, Manchester United, Alex Ferguson, and of course, for those that don't know, Burton obviously called the Brewers. I mean, it's the only name they could be called. Yeah. You draw with Man U here, you get up into the Championship, big association with the Cloughs as well.
Yeah. So I'm sure you all know the Clough family. Brian Clough is a lovely guy, a very clever guy, really successful manager. And I remember the day when it was 98 October. I had an insurance business in the high street, and one of my clients used to ring up and pretend to be somebody famous in football. So one of my staff said to me, Ben, Nigel Clough's on the phone. I said, no. I said, it's Mr. So-and-so, he's trying to wind me up. It was Nigel Clough. So he came, longest serving manager, and what a phenomenal success he brought to the town. For example, Manchester United, January 2006, we were a non-league club, they were mighty Manchester United. And I thought Alex Ferguson, was a great philanthropist until, with 35 minutes to go, he brought Rooney and Ronaldo on. But the team that Nigel built up still got a draw, 0-0 draw, and we obviously had a replay at Old Trafford. That game raised a lot of money for the club, put us on the map worldwide, and it was incredible.
Well, you've had a great run. You've had a great run with this, and you've done so much else with charity and many other things. But a final thought, your importance here with, the Burton investment plan, nearly 25 million quid's worth of government money coming to Burton.
Is that why you've invited me tonight to talk about that?
Well,
I thought we were talking about football.
I think you've done business, you do a lot of charity work, football, but this is important, isn't it?
Well, can we talk about the charity first?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, okay. So, anybody out there doesn't know, but I've got a great charity. Sport is very powerful. And today the Minister of Sport came to the Football League meeting, which took place near Chester. And his comment was, he said that football clubs like Burton Albion, they're the heartbeat of the communities all over the country. And they are. And in the latest report that the Football League produced, it confirmed that our community trust, the Burton Albion Community Trust, had delivered a social impact value of over £7.5 million, which is quite incredible. You go on the website, you have a look, and that's the power of sport.
No, it's the power of sport, but also sport needs people like you. Clubs need people like you to make it work. Towns like this need people like you to make them work, and it's been a great pleasure.
Yeah.
Great pleasure, Ben, to have you here. I want you all, please, show a round of applause for what Ben's done for this town. Okay, well, it's been a mixture tonight of local issues, national issues, and very sad international issues. It's over and out from me, but I'm going to hand you over to local girl and singer Stacey Lynn. She's going to sing the Ray Charles song, Hit the Road Jack, which, who knows, could happen to a Tory MP here at the next election.
Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. What you say? Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. Oh woman, don't you treat me so mean. You're the meanest old woman that I ever did see. But I guess if you say so, oh then I'll have to pack my things and go. That's right, hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. Oh, what you say, hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. Oh woman, don't you treat me this way, 'cause I will be back on my feet someday. I don't care if you do, 'cause it's understood. You ain't got no money, you just ain't no good. I guess if you say so, oh then I'll have to pack my things and go. That's right, hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. Now what you say, hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. Oh, 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 don't you come back no more.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here with the GB News forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. Dry for most of us during the next 24 hours, but changes on the way, increasingly warm and humid, hot for some by Saturday, but with the threat of showers and thunderstorms as well. Low pressure is edging a little closer to the UK. No major changes, but what happens is the winds veer. We're going to see a more southerly component to the wind direction, and that's going to bring more humid air, but also those higher temperatures and risk of showers. Initially, some showers, mostly light showers, affecting Cornwall through the nights. Cloudy skies here, and it's going to feel warmer compared with recent nights, 14 Celsius. A marked contrast with elsewhere, a cool night to come once again, and chilly for parts of Scotland, down to 0 degrees in some sheltered spots, but sunshine in western Scotland, Northern Ireland, western parts of the UK first thing. Any low cloud around in the morning once again retreats back to the coast, and really it lingers around the coast again into the afternoon, keeping things much cooler close to the North Sea compared with elsewhere. And it is warming up, 26, 27 Celsius towards central southern England.